This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
So, first of all, welcome back. Travis is back to join me for this episode, in case you didn't figure that out. And you've spent the last 2 weeks training on a new job.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was no secret that I hated my last job. And it isn't much of a secret that my last job wasn't particularly fond of me either.
I am interested in talking about a different kind of new job that Egwene is going to get.
Oh, yeah.
Which also may seem slightly overwhelming and a lot at first, but eventually she's going to be quite good at it.
Stellar.
So this is Chapter 32, Summoned in Haste, and our symbol is the Ring Terangrial that takes you to Tel'aran'rhiod.
The Mobius Strip.
I gotta say, that has gotten a lot easier to say. Back when I first started the podcast, saying the Terangrial that takes you to Tel'aran'rhiod was actually something that was difficult for me to say. Now it just rolls off the tongue.
Peter Piper picked a peckle pipple peppers. As I butcher that.
That was pretty bad, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually normally really good at those. I don't know why I completely stumbled over it.
Having a microphone in your face changes everything, man. It really does.
Fair. I'll take that.
Yeah.
You said it, not me. I'll take credit.
What? How does that even... Whatever.
You gave me the excuse. I didn't have to come up with it on my own.
Okay, gotcha. So the symbol is clearly based on Egwene's return to Tel'aran'rhiod, and the title is her being summoned back to become Amyrlin. Although it's not clear in this chapter that's why she's being summoned.
Oh yeah, she totally thinks she's about to get excommunicated from the Order.
I think she thinks she got caught pretending to be Aes Sedai.
Yeah, and she has no idea what the consequences to that are.
No. And funny enough, the summons, we'll talk about, the summons for Amyrlin and a trial are almost exactly the same.
I think the wording is the same.
Right. Yeah, because it's a summons to the hall, and, you know, in a lot of ways, the declaring of Amyrlin's seat is very similar to the declaring of a sentence on somebody.
Mm-hmm. How telling is that? What does that say?
Being Amyrlin's seat is not a healthy job. There's not very many that get out alive. It is kind of one of those jobs that you do until you die, for the most part, or are stilled.
Yeah, a lot of Amyrlins would die in office, but like there are also a lot of Amyrlins that were murdered or assassinated.
Really? I mean, yeah, especially by the Black.
Even more than is like, you know, publicly known.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Because like even the one, not Katara Morosa, but the one.
No, it was
for the foretelling.
It was a Katara. Katara was the.
She was the keeper.
She was the keeper.
Who was the Amyrlin?
I know the answer to this question. Where's Aradia?
The Amyrlin at the time was assassinated and, quote, died in her sleep. So, you know, anytime you have an Amyrlin dying in her sleep, you got to be like, which Black Ajah killed her? Tamara
Yes, Ospina. Yep.
Thank you, Metal Deterra. I swear to God, that little thing at the bottom that says blah 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 is typing. It's the worst invention of all time. Like, we should not know when somebody's typing. It's like, anyway, I have opinions on that, especially when you're texting somebody.
Mm-hmm.
It's evil. It's evil. Because then you're just sitting there waiting. Like, what are they saying? Should I wait? Should I type something in response? It triggers my social anxiety. It's like you just stare at it. To Egwene, Rand's visit to Cairhien seemed like one of those grand illuminators fireworks displays she had heard of but never seen, exploding all through the city. The echoes seemed to reverberate without end. She did not go near the palace again, of course, but wise ones that went every day to search for traps laid with Saidar told her what went on. Nobles stared at one another with slitted eyes, Terran and Cairhienan alike. Berelain seemed to have gone into hiding, refusing to see anyone she did not have to. Ruark apparently took her to task for neglecting her duties, with small effect. He appeared to be the only one unaffected in the whole palace. Even the servants jumped if you looked at them, though that might have just been having the wise ones themselves poking into every corner. In the tents, things were no better, among the wise ones anyway. The rest of the Aiel were like Ruark, calm and solid. Their attitude made the wise ones' moodiness even more tense by comparison. Not that it needed any. Anise and Cerelia came back from meeting Rand, all but hissing. They did not say why, not where Egwene could hear, but the feeling spread through the Wise Ones as fast as thought, until every one of them stalked about like a bristling cat ready to claw anything that moved. Their apprentices stepped lightly and spoke softly, but still were scolded for what would have passed without notice before, and punished for what would have brought only a scolding.
Yeah, so tensions are high. I don't remember exactly what went on that triggered that.
This is mostly Rand he has been encountering Avienda and running away from her. He's got Lews Therin in his head. And I went back and looked, and in the last time we saw this group of people, Rand was basically just ranting and raving and yelling at everybody. He was like, had the maidens, he had not the maidens, the maids, the actual maids in tears. He had like the Wise Ones. He was just yelling at them nonstop. He just went on like a 3-day rant about everybody in the palace. So everybody's walking on eggshells because Rand was just basically being an asshole to everyone because of Lews Therin and Avienda and his like issues with them. And so that's why Berelain's gone into hiding. The Wise Ones are pissed off. The Aiel are, pretty just normal.
Yeah, I mean the Aiel they're a stoic bunch of people.
Right.
They're pretty unfazed by anything, except water. But even that's starting to become like, well, we can live with that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean at the point where you've gone across a major river holding on to a floating tree that you cut down, lashed together, a couple of trees lashed together with like ropes. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's like, well, if that didn't kill me, I'm probably good. The next big section is really all about the fact that Shido Wise Ones are just coming and going however they please throughout all of Cairhien and the Aiel camp. And just like how terrible of an idea that is. Yeah,
the weird like sanctity that Wise Ones have, even during like blood feuds, that Wise Ones can just come and go through the workings of any clan at any time, just seems so wild to me. Like the amount of information that a Wise One can get just from walking into the enemy's camp. Like, doesn't even have to talk to anybody or get any information. Just get a count of spears and a lay of the land. And like, I mean, granted, the Wise Ones are supposed to be above that, and they're not supposed to give any of that information to the chiefs or to the spears. It seems wildly unbalanced.
It's when one side is violating the cultural norms for the advantage, and the other side hasn't realized really what's going on and is still sort of upholding cultural norms, let's say, around declaring an election winner, and the other side is declaring that perhaps maybe it was unfair.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that hard that if you violate the cultural norms that aren't necessarily laws, and we see that a lot, especially with the Wise Ones, that a lot of their interactions are cultural norms, not laws. And so it's easy for someone like Savannah and the rest of the Shido Aiel to violate those things, because they can basically say, what are you going to do, right? Like,
if we want to compare it to what's going on right now, the American people hold deeply to their traditions, but they're not necessarily laws. They're just traditional ways that things have been done, and there's precedent for them having been done that way. That doesn't mean that there's no law that it can't be done differently. So while the Aiel rather hold so closely and so deeply to Giotto, and they expect that unifying factor to make it safe for Wise Ones to walk back and forth between enemy camps without information being used or weaponized, like there's no law that says that it can't be, just tradition. And then you have a self-proclaimed Wise One like Savannah who has thrown tradition and Giotto out the window.
Yeah, she hasn't quite assassinated another one of the Wise Ones yet, but she's about to.
But she's planning it.
Yeah. She's like, she's been pissing me off and something has to be done, so.
Right. And, like, I wanted to bring up a point where one of the things that kind of stood out to me when looking for things to talk about in this chapter was that, like, the other Wise Ones, the other Shido Wise Ones, accept Savannah as a Wise One. Like, Savannah calls herself a Wise One, and the other Wise Ones call her a Wise One, even though she was never an apprentice. She's never been to Ruidian. She's never done any of the training. She has no right to the title, but because she declared herself a wise one and nobody stood against it, she's been accepted as one, which, like, we see that with Avienda. She declares herself a wise one, and that's what ultimately made her, or granted her, that title, or that approval for that title. But she had to earn the ability to make that declaration. The point that I'm making there is that, like, part of the training to become a wise one is learning when you are wise enough to hold your own against other wise ones. And Savannah decided that she had reached that point without having done any of the training, and declared herself a wise one by whatever proxy she did. And the other wise ones must have just accepted it, which is why she has that status.
Something I've talked about before, but I'm going to bring up again, is the Dunning-Kruger effect, where, like, when you know only a little bit, you can be super confident. And then the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know until you become an expert. And I feel like Savannah, most of the Wise One's apprentices, they're in that, like, that valley of, like, oh, wow, I realize how much I don't know, so I better learn while I can. And then when they start to become an expert, they start to rebel. Savannah started to call herself an expert before she fell into the valley of knowing enough to just realize how little she knew. So she just assumes she knows everything, and that's good enough, and therefore she's as good as the rest of the wise ones. Savannah didn't need to go to the crystal columns because she already knew everything she needed to know. She'd made her assumptions, and there was no reason to challenge those assumptions.
Right. I mean, she never went through the rings, and there's nobody who could tell her what the rings would show her. And I do feel like passing through the rings in Ruidian does grant a person a certain amount of wisdom that they would never be able to have otherwise, because of the foresight that it gives them into what their own individual future may look like.
Yeah, I was thinking more humility for where they came from in their past.
Yeah. Well, that's the crystal columns for sure.
Yeah. You're talking about the rings. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right, because wise ones go twice, right? They go
yes.
First through the rings and then through the crystal columns.
Yep. So, yeah, Savannah never got that. She knew the story more or less. She knew the watered down foundational part of what the crystal columns teach or reveal, but she never had the experience of going through the rings and learning about the decisions that she may make in her lifetime and how those will affect herself and her future and the future of those around her.
Did she know the actual outline of the crystal column story?
Only after Rand revealed it.
Okay. Not before.
Not before.
Gotcha. Savannah is the ultimate flat earther. She's out there, like, leading a group of people, declaring the earth is flat, telling all the scientists they're wrong, getting in their faces and being all upfront about it. And then when her, like, experiments prove her wrong, she's like, huh.
She's absolutely convinced that every vaccine has a microchip and a lethal dose of mercury in it because she saw it in a YouTube video one time.
Totally. Savannah is definitely an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah. She's a flat wheeler. There is no wheel. It's just a flat and straight line.
What's the opposite of a cyclical universe? A finite universe, sir?
If you listen to what Robert Jordan has to say, it was the Greeks who gave us the linear, was the word that he used.
Linear. I'll go with linear, sure. She believes in a linear wheel, which
a linear
timeline. Wheel. By the way, wonderful. I love that terminology. She loves a linear wheel. I'm going for it.
She believes in linear time. So if Savannah were to rewrite the series or recredit the series, it would be called The Line of Time.
The line of time. The line segment of time. The skid mark of time.
The skid mark. Gross.
Well, I mean, that's what happens when you taint the power, is you get the skid mark of time. You just drag the power right across the taint. This
devolved so quickly.
So page 2. So Egwene, this is a summary of what Egwene's been doing. It's been a couple of days. Samael tried to spy on the Tower Aes Sedai, trying to figure out what was going on with the constant channeling, and they got tied up. Nothing else really significant. This is she's talking about how It was the other hours that dragged out as though mired in mud. There was so little to do that she thought she might burst from frustration. You know, that doesn't give us a lot to talk about.
You know what? It does kind of blow my mind that, like, she's been a Wise One's apprentice, and, like, granted, the Wise Ones don't think that she's strong enough to re-enter Teller and Riyadh, but, like, there's so much other training that Wise One's apprentices get that she's not able to do, that they're not giving her any of that. It always bothered me that, like, she wasn't getting any of the other apprentice training while she was rebuilding her strength to re-enter Teller and Riyadh. Like, she shouldn't have had so much downtime. The Wise Ones definitely could have been teaching her other things like they had been before.
So here's my take on that. I know Cerelia is still teaching her stuff, but really at this point, pretty much all the other Wise Ones accept her as an equal, and that they essentially have nothing left to teach her. She is essentially a Wise One. She just needs to come to that realization. And that's why they're so willing to accept her summoning, and when she tells them that she's the Emerald Seat. You know, her final test really is the whipping. I believe that beating really is, for them, that makes her Aiel.
Yeah.
But they don't have much to teach her. I really think at this point, like, other than she's learned so much so fast.
Yeah. She's always been a freaking ridiculously rapid student. I think that that's really valid. I also think that the only reason that they're not pushing her to declare herself a Wise One is because she's already declared herself an Aes Sedai.
Mm-hmm. That's also a good point, is that they're not trying to pull her away from that. They would like to, but they understand that she is one. She's Aes Sedai, not Wise One. Because
when they felt that Aviendha had reached that point and had learned everything that she had to learn, or had everything that they had to teach, they started, you know, wasting her time and making her feel useless, so she would declare her indignity and assert herself as ready. And they didn't do that so much with Egwene, because an Aes Sedai isn't going to become a Wise One.
If they only knew she wasn't actually an Aes Sedai, they would probably be pushing way harder. You know?
Agreed. And I do love that in this chapter we get to see Egwene resent her dishonesty. Like, we don't get to see the beating where she manifests that resentment and that shame, but we do get to see her in her own head scold herself for perpetuating and telling yet another lie to these women that she loves and respects and honors so deeply.
Right. I think it's very important that she does live up to her toe. That beating that she takes is as important for her as it is for the Wise Ones, for her to because the guilt that she feels is something she has to leave behind.
Yeah, especially after, you know, her treatment of has she done the thing to Nynaeve yet at this point in the story?
That was a while ago.
Okay, where like she summons the super scary men.
That was last book, I think, actually.
Okay, yeah,
which back when they were like together, or she was, because she was still learning about Teleron Riyadh herself.
Mm-hmm.
And this book she hasn't, and that was Shadows Rising, whereas Lord of Chaos she hasn't been in Teleron Riyadh at all.
Yeah, especially after the way that she, you know, came down on Nynaeve for being dishonest and being reckless, and then for her to continue with her own dishonesty and recklessness, and to watch that come full circle and watch her have that realization in her own way and do what she felt was necessary to right that wrong.
Right. Whether or not you agree with the beating, like, that is something she felt could make up for the lies that she had been telling and felt like she was forced to tell, you know?
And that's not to say that if she'd had more time and didn't need to get to Saladar yesterday, that she wouldn't have taken a different path, a more honorable path of...
Or a less painful one, anyway.
Maybe.
I was thinking more of servitude and digging and that sort of thing.
Yeah, because, you know, there's a million different ways to repay your toe. Once you've earned toe, there's a million ways to meet that. And, taking a beating like that is the fastest way to do it, but not necessarily the most honorable way.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm not sure I would call it, like, the least honorable. Mostly just, like... Because, like, I feel like she earns back her honor either way.
There's a conversation at one point in the series where they talk about the different ways that you can regain G after, earning toe, and, letting whoever you owe that to beat you is an acceptable way to do it, but not necessarily the most honorable way. Like, I think that Avienda talks about that a little bit when she's preparing like the knife and the switch and the cane for Elaine.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. But again, with time constraints, she had, that was really her only choice, because
she was like, I have so much obligation to these women that I have to meet, and I have no time to meet it. I lay my body before you.
So between that meeting and now, she's got some downtime, and so she attempts to contact the sea folk and go talk to the wave mistress.
The Windfinder.
The Windfinder. Well,
both.
Egwene did not know whether Rand had met this wave mistress, but she hoped he had. So, of course, he hasn't, because he's been avoiding them. But she's basically out there to learn a little bit from them and maybe investigate and maybe be a little bit of an ambassador. I love this line. She hoped they did not grovel too much, though. Rand got more than that, enough of that already. And it's like, yeah, these sea folk do not grovel to Rand. And she also, I love how much, this is one of those things where the girls always assume that everyone's groveling to Rand, and Rand always assumes everyone's just serving Egwene when they're both like fighting these massive battles on their own to get the respect they deserve. So this is one of those little lines where it's like, yeah, stop and realize that someone else is probably dealing with as much disrespect as you're about to, which is getting dumped in the ocean.
It speaks to both of their characters, like all of their characters. Like the fact that Rand makes it look like he is doing all of this with like ease and command and dignity to people that don't actually know the struggles that he's going through speaks so highly of his capability. The same as Egwene. The fact that like people think that Egwene has all of this handed to her, or that people are just serving her because she's an Aes Sedai of the Green Aja in super heavy air quotes. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think with Rand and Egwene in particular, the two of them just make assumptions about each other without actually paying that close attention to what's actually going on.
Yep.
They're just and like, oh yeah, it's easier for him, of course.
It's
in
one
the same
of
way that the boys are like, oh yeah, he's good with women. It's like, no, pay attention. They're not. It's not.
That running trope, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that I know that that's one of the biggest gripes that people have regarding Egwene's character, is that she makes all of these assumptions about Rand and about, anything else that is super important to her. But that's not a flaw that is unique to her, because other characters do that just as much.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally. No, that's a Jordan writing trope, if anything else. It's the fact that all people make these assumptions, that everybody else has it easier, that everybody else, just doesn't have to deal with the same shit that you deal with. Like, that's just human nature. And I think that's what he's commenting on more than this character in particular.
We get to see her relationship with Gawain unfolding, which, my first couple of read-throughs before the last books were put together, I was like super into this romance. Like, they were so cute together and they were so into each other, and I was really happy that they were making each other happy, and that, like,
Egwene and Galad?
No, Gawain.
Oh, Gawain. Sorry, yes. Yeah, of course, Gawain. Egwene and Gawain? Yeah.
I was super happy that she found, like, a replacement Ginger for her original Ginger, because good for her. And, like, Gawain at this point is still the brother that we're supposed to like.
Right. So it's hard. I just finished editing the conversation I had with Talir about this, which is that we talked about this a lot, about how much. Anyway, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I go for it. I want to hear what you have to say, because I haven't heard that episode with Talir yet.
Oh, just how wrong they are for each other, and how bad of how for her in particular, she have felt the same way you're talking right now as a teenager when she was younger than Egwene, but now as an adult she sees just how flawed and how bad the relationship actually is, and how shallow it actually is.
Yeah, because their entire relationship is just this like puppy love infatuation with their ideas of the other person. Like, they don't really actually know very much about each other, and I don't feel like the time that they do spend together in Cairhien, they actually spend getting to know one another and learning about one another. They just spend it flirting and kissing and, being a little risque.
Yeah, they are going on long walks and talking, which I guess, that's what a date is, right? They're just walking and talking.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of, I'm thinking like, oh, that's a good way to kind of get to know each other. That's the beginning of the relationship. But I'll admit it's not like they're testing the relationship in any way. They're just vaguely getting to know each other.
Right. So yeah, I have always found the level of commitment that they have to each other that both came on so suddenly and so strongly to be a little weird. It would have been nice if that puppy love actually evolved over time into something, the way that Rand and Men's relationship and even Rand and Avienda's relationship really unfolded.
Not so much Rand and Elaine's, though.
Rand and Elaine was pretty rushed, I would say, but also Rand and Elaine spent a lot of time in the Stone of Tyr, teaching each other things. She helped him figure out what she could about the One Power, and she gave him a crash course in being a ruler.
Right. And my question is that really more time Egwene and Gawain are spending together here? Or is it just more significant time?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that it's the quantity of time so much as the quality of the time that was spent together.
Gotcha.
I don't feel like what Gawain and Egwene are doing has any major, effects on their development other than their infatuation with each other. We see multiple occasions where Rand wishes that he could talk to Elaine because of her wisdom as a ruler and the way that, she would be able to deal with or the insight that she would have about a certain situation. Whereas Egwene never wants Gawain's presence for anything other than the fact that he's cute and she can sit on his lap. We never see her think any deeper thoughts than that about Gawain, but we see Rand think deeper thoughts about Elaine.
Well, and she wants him to be a warder, but she doesn't really totally grok what a warder does and what a warder is for and how to use a warder effectively.
Right. She wants him as her warder the same way that I want Chris Evans to be my knight in shining armor.
I thought you just wanted him out of the shining armor.
Yeah, but, he can come and, swoop me up out of my job and save me from my dreary, monotonous life before.
It sounds wonderful.
Right. Drive me away in his white Lamborghini.
Do we need to take a break before we get back to the podcast?
No, I can contain myself till later.
Okay. Take a quick cold shower before we get back into... All right, I feel better. I realized I was like, would you shut up? I have to pee. I was like, wait, no, that's my problem. I need to go take care of that. So she gets boated out to visit the Shan boat. And I feel like I frequently confuse this scene with the one where Nynaeve gets herself boated out. Isn't there a scene just like this?
I'm trying to think of the times that Nynaeve went out to the sea folk ships. She boated out to a sea folk ship to do her wedding vows. She was on a boat when she got, balefire by Moghedien. And then there was the time that she boarded the sea folk ship to go to Tanchico.
Maybe that's sort of the one I'm thinking of when they get boated out there and they ask for passage and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And they're treated with some respect, right? They're not dumped overboard.
They are. I think one of the reasons that they are given that respect at first is because they're not wearing their rings on their hands.
Right.
So they're not instantly recognized as Aes Sedai until they proclaim themselves Aes Sedai. So whereas Egwene was climbing up the ladder and had her ring on her hand, and then that's when they sliced the ladder and were like, nope.
See, I disagree with that. I think they sliced the ladder when the Wayfinder sensed the fact that she could channel.
You think so?
Finally, she reached the rail. Immediately, her eyes fell on a woman not a span away on their deck. Her blouse and trousers were blue silk with a darker sash. She wore 3 worked gold rings in each ear, and a fine chain that sported tiny, glittering medallions ran from one to a ring in her nose. Elaine had described this and even demonstrated using Teleron Riyadh, but seeing it in the flesh made Egwene wince. But there was something else. She could sense the ability to channel. She had found the Windfinder. So if she can sense the ability in the Windfinder can sense it in her. She opened her mouth, and a dark hand flashed in front of her eyes with a gleaming dagger. Before she could scream, the blade sliced through the ropes of the ladder. So it's basically, she gets to the top, sees the Windfinder, senses that she has the ability to channel, and then the Windfinder cuts her down. So the Windfinder was up there waiting for someone so she could sense if they had the ability to channel and cut them down.
They know that the city is full of Aes Sedai and Wise Ones and that they can channel. Also, isn't it just kind of customary for the Windfinder and the Wave Mistress of the ship to just greet newcomers coming onto the boat? It seems like there's always a Wave Mistress and a Windfinder when somebody's coming onto a Seafolk ship.
What I'm looking at is a line a little further down. "You are refused the gift of passage," the green-clad woman called, and the one in red shouted, "Tell the other, disguises do not fool us. You do not frighten us. You are all refused the gift of passage." This means, who is the other here?
I think the other Aes Sedai.
Right.
I'm thinking it's the other Aes Sedai. It wouldn't surprise me if some of the White Tower Aes Sedai, whether it's the emissaries that Rand knows about or the other ones that are hiding out in Lady Irillan's mansion, have tried to make contact with the Seafolk, maybe even got onto the ship and, like, disrespected the Seafolk. Who knows? It's Elida's emissary. They're not good people. I think it's a combination of them sensing the channeling, seeing the Aes Sedai ring, but seeing Aiel wise women clothing and thinking that it's a wise or an Aes Sedai trying to disguise herself.
Oh, okay. I see. I was like, why are they calling her disguised? Do they think she's somebody else? But I see. She's basically dressed as an Aiel.
Mm-hmm.
And so they think she's trying to disguise herself as an Aiel to sneak on board.
And they may not know. I may be completely wrong about them knowing that the wise ones, the Aiel wise ones, can channel. The Seafolk may very well not know that. And so when they sense this woman that could channel, they immediately assume that it's an Aes Sedai, even though she's dressed like a wise one, and are like, your disguises won't work here.
Yeah, I'm wondering, tell the other.
Is it other or others?
Other, singular. Which makes me think that there was someone in particular who tried to sneak on board. That someone in particular tried to do something with the Athal Anmir. And I Googled it and I couldn't find anything in particular. But
it is a singular other. Cool.
Yeah.
You refuse the gift of passage. Tell the other, disguises do not fool us. Yeah, so I imagine that there's another Aes Sedai who tried to get on board. I wonder if it was Galena.
That's I was about to say. Do you think it's Galena? Because she would have been the one. If it wasn't all of the Aes Sedai, it was one in particular. Maybe someone of the Black who was trying to do something.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in my headcanon, it's Galena, especially just because there's the other brocaded red worked with gold thread. So the other Seafolk, the third Seafolk person that's there yelling this down, is wearing red, and I think that might be a subtle pass.
Yeah, I that's it. I have a big question mark by this because I would love to see some evidence of someone saying like, "Oh yeah, I tried to contact the Athal Anmir and this happened," but I don't see any.
Do we ever hear anything like? We'll have to pay attention when Galena. Maybe somebody can throw this in the things to look out for channel if that's still a thing. Do we ever hear Galena speaking down on the Seafolk, like those wretched Seafolk women or something stupid like that?
Not that I can remember off the top of my head. As far as I know, the Tower Aes Sedai don't ever address the Seafolk. In revenge for cutting the rope, Egwene
throws them into the river.
Yeah, basically picks them all up and throws them in the river. It's a very Suwon thing to do.
Can we talk about how strong Egwene is for a second?
Yeah.
She's not even fully trained. She's not even reached her full potential. Well, no, she's probably... Has she reached her full potential? She was forced by the Shanshan.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say pretty much at this point, I guess she... women tend to go in a slope, whereas men tend to go in steps.
Fits and starts, yeah.
So it's hard to really know where she stops, but I would assume about now is when she reaches her full potential.
I know that when Elaine and Nynaeve are back in Saladar, they talk about how they're already so much stronger than every Aes Sedai in the camp, that Elaine hasn't reached her full potential, and she's already stronger than most Aes Sedai. Nynaeve is stronger than any Aes Sedai, and she still hasn't reached her full potential either. But I don't know if Egwene... I think she does also comment about Egwene being so much stronger than her, but that's because Egwene was forced.
That's what I would think as well, is that Egwene was forced in the way the other two weren't. And if they are almost at their full potential, well, Egwene and Elaine should be on the same basic time schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And so if except Egwene was forced, so then she would be basically at her full potential.
Yeah, because we know that Egwene and Elaine have the same max potential. Like, they're so equal in maximum potential that debating the difference isn't worth anybody's time.
I thought Egwene was going to be more powerful.
Egwene? I don't think so. I think that the three of them are relatively equal. And by the three of them, I mean Egwene, Elaine, and Aviendha. I think all three of them have pretty much the same potential to such a degree that the only way to find out which one of them is actually stronger would be a pure strength duel. But in this particular instance, Egwene, as a crudely trained but very powerful channeler, splits her weave 4 ways. One of those splits is a shield that is strong enough to hold another channeler shielded while also picking 3 people up and throwing them 36 feet into the air.
Right. No, it's crazy. And just in the companion, by the way, describes Elaine and Egwene at the same potential level, 8 plus 5. Aviendha is 2 levels stronger. No, less strong. 11 plus 2. So Aviendha is 2 levels less strong than Elaine and Egwene. And Nynaeve is 4 levels stronger than Elaine and Egwene.
She's up there with, like, the Forsaken. She's above Moghedien. She's at a level with, like, Semiraj or something like that. Olivia is the strongest female channeler ever, period, dot, end of discussion. Like, Olivia, Lanfear, as Sindane, picks up Olivia's strength and is like, she's stronger than I was during the Age of Legends before the Fen got me, and nobody was ever stronger than me. Yeah, like, Olivia is crazy powerful.
And again, the men are on a different scale.
Right. Oh, I was going to say, the strength levels, they're not necessarily a gradient. You know, somebody who is... I feel like the strength levels work the way that, like, earthquake magnitudes work.
Oh, it's definitely a logarithmic scale, without a doubt.
It's not a linear increase so much as it is a very logarithmic or even exponential growth. But yeah, so somebody who's like a 14 on this scale is actually like exponentially weaker than somebody who's a 15 on the scale, even though they're only one number apart on the scale.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly what that multiplication factor, that exponential factor is, whether it's like a 2 or a 20 or, you know, whatever it is, but or what the base log is. Anyway, it's a math thing. The scale is just a way to sort of rank people. It's not really an accurate linear measure of how powerful you are. Like
if you were to put the amount of Sidar that, you know, each woman can hold according to their strength level into a cup, it's not going to be like an ounce more just because they're a single level higher or something like that. It's a little more tricky than that. But I don't know exactly how much trickier than that it is.
You're going to turn me into a math professor if you're not careful.
You've done that to yourself already. I'm just going to bring it out.
I can start talking and, yeah. Exponential growth. E to the... Never mind. Okay, if you have a population of bunny rabbits and they give birth at a certain rate and they die at a certain rate, you can model the... Okay, anyway. Multiplying, Doc, I'm multiplying. So after her failed experiment with...
Humiliating
with the sea folk, which just fails completely. Like, she gets nothing done. She gets dunked in the water. She tries to dunk them, and they have no problem because they just dive because they're basically half fish.
Also, we hear the story that Andrel tells about living amongst the sea folk for a brief period of time and how they all go cliff diving.
Right. So picking them up at a height, even though it's a spectacular height with the 1 power, it just isn't that high up.
Right. It's described as 12 to like 14 paces or something like that, which if a pace is 3 feet to make it, an easy number, then they're, 36 feet above the water, but they jump from like 80-foot cliffs. So it's like, yeah, this is chump change.
And then on the 5th night, which the 5th night of what? I guess the time
of just that last week before she was able to re-enter Teller and Riyadh. That's what she's counting down in her head, is when she gets to go back to training in Teller and Riyadh.
Because, like, and it's 2 days, and it's also since Rand left, because that's also, that they just are coincidental. That's when she was told. So it's the 5th night since Rand left, I think, as well. Right, because she starts out with 2 days after Rand left, and so, like, we just sort of get on the 5th night, so we're getting this sort of count, and only because the last time she did the count, it was from when Rand left. But I think it's also when she was told she had 7 days until she could go back and tell her on Riyadh.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it might be both, or it might just be the Rand countdown or count up.
So, but on the 5th night, she gets to go back into the world of dreams just for like 5 minutes officially to get tested.
Yeah, who is it? Sorelia takes her on a little jaunt through the Aiel Waste.
Mm-hmm. And they repeat the physical training thing, like they make her jump, they do all that again, and of course she's fine. Because even though she's pushed herself too hard, we never really see any consequences for her disobeying the Wise Ones, right? She pushes herself super hard, and I guess she gets better eventually. Maybe it kept her out officially for longer than it should have. I don't know.
Maybe, but I also think that the Wise Ones, in their infinite wisdom, were being overly cautious about how capable she was of returning to Teller and Riyadh. Like, yeah, it was exhausting and it was straining because her body was still healing from the ordeal that Lanfear put her through, but I don't necessarily think that she was so weak that she obviously wasn't so weak that she couldn't enter and do things in Teller and Riyadh.
Right.
She honestly probably would have been safer if they would have just continued to train her and just ran her through lighter courses.
Probably not. Well, only because she was too stubborn to actually rest.
Yeah.
She thinks about how she avoided the world of the dream scape with the dark space, the glowing lights, because, like, hey, that went poorly. I don't want that to happen again. We again talked a little bit about how possibly that influenced her mind going into Gawain's dream.
Well, she talks about going into Gawain's dream. One thing she did avoid was the place between Teller and Riyadh and the waking world, the place where dreams floated. Especially, she avoided it after she found herself thinking that if she was very careful, she might be able to peek into Gawain's dreams without being drawn in, and that even if she was pulled in, it would only be a dream. She reminded herself firmly that she was a grown woman and not a silly girl. She was glad no one else saw what a snarl the man made of her thoughts. Amis and Bear would laugh till they cried.
It's that sort of justification of being like, well, I could just have a bite. And then you look down and you're like, oh, I ate the whole cake. So she's definitely trying to avoid eating that first bite, which I guess she succeeds in, except she's meeting him in the real world, so congratulations.
Yeah, but in the real world, they're not boning.
Right. Just sitting on his lap. That's got to be somewhat frustrating.
Yeah.
For both of them.
Oh, yeah, I imagine it would be.
Yeah, Bambi makes a good point. It is a bit rapey. The idea of going into his dreams and having sex with him without really his consent. He's in control of the dream. Is that rapey? That's a good debate. Ooh. Right, because it's his dream, and he's like...
And she has no control.
No. But she's sort of giving herself to that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, it's this weird, like, they're kind of raping each other, because...
In different ways.
In different ways, yeah.
Because, like...
He doesn't know he's having sex with her, which is kind of rape when you don't know who you're having sex with.
But she's actually there, like, in, a not so physical sense. She's actually present there for the sex, whereas he isn't. You know what just happened to me right now? I realized how loud I was talking and was like, oh my god, my roommate's in the other room recording. Maybe I shouldn't be so loud right now.
Aren't our minds fascinating places? We can hold two thoughts at the same time and not realize they're connected.
I don't know what's wrong with me.
And, the other thing that you can talk about this sleep sex thing is, like, it's also just sleep sex. Like sleep sex in a lot of ways it's sort of like watching a movie about sex. It's not real. Like you skip over all the awkward parts. There's no, no one's on anyone's hair. There's no. I
wouldn't call it sleep sex so much as dream sex.
Right.
Like, yeah, because all the times that I've had dreams about sex, I'm ridiculously comfortable talking about sex, guys. All of the times that I've
kidding about that, guys.
All of the times that I've ever had dreams about having sex, it's always been significantly more seamless than actually having sex.
Yeah, you skip all the awkward parts.
Right.
And there's also the idea that, like, in Teleron Riyadh, what happens to you is very realistic, and that it's in a lot of ways more realistic than what happens in a dream, even though it is a dream. But you're kind of more awake and aware. This is where I think if they met in Teleron Riyadh and had sex, it would be very different than having sex in a dream.
In Gawain's actual dream. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because, like, your actual dream is not Teleron Riyadh. Sometimes you may dream yourself into Teleron Riyadh. But yeah, your actual dreams, just your passive unconscious dreams, are not in Teleron Riyadh. They exist in that weird void in between Teleron Riyadh and the waking world.
And that's where, like, you really have to differentiate between Teleron Riyadh and a dream, because what happens to you in Teleron Riyadh happens to your flesh, whereas what happens to you in a dream doesn't. And so, is it really sex, or is it just kind of imagining sex when it's
Here's my theory. Because Egwene is asleep, and because she's put her conscious subconscious mind into the subconscious mind of somebody else's dream, it wouldn't matter if she got hurt in his dream. It's not Teleron Riyadh. It wouldn't affect her actual body, because it's just a made-up dreamscape. It's not the world
absolutely.
Of dreams. Just to answer Chuck's question. But to go back to my thought, because they're both asleep, like, technically she's merged her dreaming mind with his dreaming mind. So they're both just dreaming, having natural dreams that, because she's put her dream mind into his dream mind, he has control. And she has very little ability to influence any of that.
And she remembers her dreams much more clearly because she is a dream walker, but that doesn't mean it's any less a dream.
And because she's trained to be aware of her dreaming.
Right. She has lucid dreaming, but lucid dreaming is going to be different than
dream walking.
And lucid dreaming in someone else's dream is going to be different than dream walking.
I do agree that it's still rapey in the sense that, like, she's technically experiencing sexual things with Gawain without Gawain's awareness or consent. And of course, all of this is operating under the assumption that they are actually fucking in Gawain's dreams, because that's never said outright. It's just kind of implied.
It's implied based on things what she assumes Berelain does and how she reacts, and it's as straightforward as something that Jordan ever writes is, without him actually saying it.
Right.
But I agree. Without him being aware that that's what's happening, it's wrong to go into his dream and cause that to happen. Once by accident was fine. That was like both people were caught in a switch situation where neither one had agency and neither one was, like, making a choice to do that to each other. But at this point, I think if Egwene made a choice to enter his dream, that would be wrong. Right.
It's a conscious decision at this point and not something that she found herself in by mistake.
I think here's a good point. Like, do you think Rourke and Amis, when they're, like, away from each other for a while, they're like, hey, see you in your dreams?
Oh, God, yeah. I would. Wear something sexy to bed tonight. I'll see you in your dreams.
Exactly. Yeah, no, totally. So they do a couple of these tests where they pull her in for a night or two, and then finally they go to meet in the Stone of Tyr. And I want to point out before this meeting that Rand happens to be in Teleron Riyadh in the flesh, hanging out behind one of the stone columns watching.
Now, my question, is he there just to check on Kalendor, or is he there because he knows that the Wise Ones have meetings with the Aes Sedai there?
He says he goes there to look at Kalendor frequently. So that's kind of what I would assume, is he was just in there checking out Kalendor. And he sort of chuckles. He's like, Tavir and Twisting must have brought me here at the right time. So to me, that even he thinks that it was coincidence, which means there's no way he planned it ahead of time.
Cool.
But I do think, like, he goes there pretty frequently to check on Kalendor and look at it, because, like, there's something about Kalendor, you know?
He's still trying to figure out Kalendor.
Right. Because there's, like, he's like, why does it keep coming up in the prophecies? Why do the Chosen Call, who, like, are the most powerful thing in the world, and I could just, you know...
obliterate the universe with.
Right. Why are they completely ignored in the prophecies? Whereas this flawed Sangreal that's not really even that powerful compared to some of the other ones I've got, like...
I don't think that it's an actual thing, Chuck. I don't think that you do lose yourself or lose a part of yourself by going in the flesh. I think that that is a twisting or a thing that was, you know, developed, an idea that was developed because of the fact that the Forsaken and the Shadow used going into the world of dreams in their flesh as a tool so often that it became associated with evil. And because the Forsaken are seen as both more than and less than human, they associate those two things with each other.
I both agree with you, because, like, I think that honestly skimming is just traveling the world, an empty part of the world of dreams in the flesh. That's all you're doing. However, my counterfactual is that we have Perrin's, like, smelling a cold smell on Slayer, which is similar to what he smells on Rand after he does a lot of entering the dreams in the flesh. And so I have to wonder if there isn't some loss of empathy that happens.
But does he smell that with Sindane and with Grandal, who are there in the flesh?
But they're not in the flesh. They always dream. The women dream themselves in. The men are the ones who enter in the flesh.
I always just figured that the really ugly smell around Slayer was just because of how evil and inhuman he was.
Right. And that maybe smelling that around Rand is him smelling Moradin.
You said smelling Moradin?
Yeah.
The connection there?
Right. I had never thought about that before, but Bambi brought that up, and I think that's a very good explanation. I'm gonna have to keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, that could be a good canon.
Because one of the things I want to talk about very briefly is Perrin, that he was not in the last book at all, and I didn't realize he is not in this book either up until almost like 70% of the way through it. Like, he's got one brief POV, not even a full chapter, just a POV in the beginning. And then he's not in it again until, like, it's a couple of more chapters. We're talking, like, chapter 37 in the book. So he's almost not in 2 books in a row. And then when he comes back, what we get is what I call empath Perrin, which we didn't have before, which is he can tell the emotions of everyone around him. Now, with him, it's smell, but essentially you have to treat him like an empath who's overwhelmed with the emotions of the people around him.
And I think that a lot of that has come from just him embracing the wolf to a certain degree that he hadn't yet, and, like, learning to use it. And a lot of that, I think, comes from his interactions with Fail. He's been using the smells of Fail's emotions to deal with and interact with Fail. And I think that has made him, because he found that to be a useful tool in understanding his wife, he learned to apply it more heavily in other parts of his existence.
I debate how useful it is and how much it is actually giving him...
counteractive?
Yeah. Giving him too much information where he acts on the wrong thing instead of just acting on what's in front of him.
Yeah.
He acts on what he can smell, which is not what he should be acting on. But that's a whole nother discussion that we'll get to when Perrin actually pops on screen. I just wanted to point out that he is not in much of this book. Not only is he not in the last book at all, he's not in this book much either.
Yeah, not really until it's time to rescue Rand.
Right. So I was just like, man, I missed the hell out of Perrin.
Perrin is bae.
So let's see if do you want to get into the meeting with the Tower Aes Sedai?
On the 7th night, she prepared herself for bed carefully, putting on a fresh shift, brushing her hair till it shone. all useless so far as Tiller and Riyadh was concerned, but it kept her from thinking about how her stomach was doing backflips. Tonight, it would be Aes Sedai waiting in the heart of the stone, not Nynaeve or Elaine. That should make no difference, unless the ivory-backed hairbrush froze mid-stroke. Unless one of the Aes Sedai revealed that she was only accepted. Why had she not thought of that before? Light, but she wished she could talk to Nynaeve and Elaine. Only she couldn't see what good it would do, and she was certain that dream of breaking things meant something would go badly wrong if she did speak to them.
Yeah, that's an important point, that she has that breaking dream. I think this is now the third time it's been mentioned. That, like, that is one of the reasons why she's avoiding those two until this meeting. And, like, not sharing information with them.
Yeah, because she just has a gut feeling that something about that dream says that interacting with Nynaeve and Elaine right now is not what needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the next paragraph, what we were talking about earlier in the episode was, she's considering lying to Amis and telling her that she's not actually feeling up to going into the world of dreams because she's nervous about this meeting. Mm-hmm. And, like, she just kicks herself in the ass for another lie and being a coward.
Right. Well, and I think that really what she says to herself is whatever happens tonight, she had to make herself face it, and that was that. And that's, suddenly she calms down. Like, once she realizes that, like, no matter what the consequences, I'm just going to face them, and that's that. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm just going to face the music.
Exactly. And one of the things that I've been waiting to say this entire episode, and that I think is pretty relevant now, is that I feel like this is the part of the story where Egwene stops being a foolish young lady and starts to grow into an incredibly capable woman.
Agreed, yeah.
I think it's around the time of this summoning that she has started to realize some of her own personal flaws and some of her own personal capabilities, and is putting those things together to become the person that she actually wants to be and is capable of being.
Right. And she still has a lot of learning to do. She needs Suon. She needs Suon's advice. She needs to get better at being Amyrlin. She hasn't had any practice at that. But she is very much, I think, now a grown-up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the big difference. Is this, looking, whatever happens tonight, she had to, accepting what's happening, and that very much turns her from a child to a grown-up, rather than fighting against, just like, yeah, this is reality, I deal with reality as it comes.
Right, yeah, she's no longer the spoiled innkeeper's daughter who can fold her arms and puff out her bottom lip and flip her hair and get what she wants.
Or, is excited to go on an adventure, right? Like, there's no adventure going on here. This is life, and she's dealing with it.
Exactly.
Whatever happens.
She's taking it on one step at a time, head on, full responsibility.
So yeah, loving the maturity of Egwene and seeing her sort of step up. And before, what I like is that the maturity happens before she's declared Amyrlin's seat, not after.
Yeah, the maturity comes before the sophistication. She becomes a much more sophisticated woman after becoming the Amyrlin seat and having Swan's guidance and training and all of that. But I do like to see that she's already becoming a mature and responsible woman before getting thrust into this position of power.
So in pops the Tower Aes Sedai, including Suon, who we get that sort of final, I think we've had this like once or twice before, where she's like been like, who's that blue-eyed girl? And you're like, yeah, that's Suon. She doesn't look the same because she's been stilled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's like convinced that it's not the same woman until she hears her talk.
Right, and even then, she's like, until they identify her, she's like, not sure about that. And then we get the summons, basically, almost right away, as soon as they see her. It's like the first thing they say.
Mm-hmm. No greeting, nothing, just...
Nothing. Egwene Alvier, Shiriam said formally, you are summoned before the hall of the tower. Her tilted green eyes shone with some suppressed emotion. Egwene's stomach sank. They knew she'd been masquerading as a full sister, which they don't. Ask not why you are summoned, Carlinia said right behind Shiriam, her icy voice making the formality even harder. It is yours to answer, not to question. For some reason, she had to cut her dark hair short. Remember that was the nightmare?
The nightmare with the Trollocs.
With the Trollocs. That was the sort of unimportant detail that seemed to loom large in Egwene's mind. Gotta say, that's Jordan just saying shit to us. She certainly did not want to think about what this all meant. The ceremonious phrases rolled out in a stately rhythm. Amis and Blair adjusted their shawls and frowned, their irritation beginning to turn to concern.
You say you think that's just Jordan telling us something? Like, what do you mean by that?
Oh, just talking about how unimportant details loom large. That, like, Jordan likes to hide really important things in the unimportant details.
A little bit of, pushing on the fourth wall there.
Mm-hmm.
I do also think that it adds to the realisticness of what Egwene is feeling, because I know for me personally, if I've been when I'm in a situation that's like really stressful or really anxiety inducing, I tend to notice really weird details. Like things that just shouldn't matter or have nothing to do with what's actually happening.
And that's our brains doing that, right? They when we get this adrenaline pumped into our body, our brains tend to remember little details like that, and that's why it feels like time slows down, because more of the memories get recorded in your long-term memory. And so when you go back and think about that time, it's like, wow, I can remember all these details. Time must have slowed down for me to notice all those little details.
Yeah, and like Chuck is saying in the chat, that's very fight or flight. Your brain starts working on adrenaline, running at this incredible pace, picking up as many details as possible, because who knows what detail is going to be the detail that saves your life right now.
Right. And she just got summoned to the principal's office, or the dragon's lair, however, whether you want.
She just got summoned to the highest court in the land to stand trial before the Aes Sedai.
Yeah, it's like being impeached.
Yeah.
Or it should be. And they're not telling her anything. And part of we talked about this briefly, but the language used to summon someone to be raised to the Amyrlin is the same language summoning someone to be
tried.
To be tried for crime.
Yeah, I think one of the Aes Sedai, while they're prepping Egwene for the ceremony, actually explains to her that the wording is the same.
And she's like, funny coincidence. And Egwene's like, funny coincidence. Also funny that I committed a major crime of pretending to be Amyrlin's seat for many, many months. Although Suan is like, yeah, I pretty much expected you'd have to. And clearly Moraine doesn't care all that much. So in a lot of ways, I think that like maybe they're blowing that crime a little out of proportion.
The crime of pretending to be Aes Sedai. You said Amyrlin's seat.
Yes.
Also, can we talk about how terrifying these next couple of lines are? Delay not in your coming. It is yours to obey in haste. It is well to fear the summons of the hall. It is well to obey in haste and humility unasking. You are summoned to kneel before the hall of the tower and accept their judgment. All of that delivered in like cold, unemotional stoniness, like while she's already suffering from a guilt complex.
With no concept that they're going to raise her to Amyrlin. That, like, the idea that she'd be raised to Amyrlin's seat is so foreign that, like, there can't be any positive outcome to this. There can't be. Like, there is no positive in her mind outcome to this summons.
Yeah, not knowing how much they know and fearing the absolute worst.
Right. I was going to say, it would be almost nice if we had, like, a modern-day sort of powerful body that could treat our president this way. Anyway, sorry, I'm a little bitter about the election, the fact that Trump hasn't conceded yet.
Maybe something like a Senate or a Supreme Court. Yeah, we can make all the comparisons we want, but I think we're all pretty aware of what's going on. No need to really hash it out too hard.
Right. It is, I will say this, though, I do find it ironic that with all of the Elida crazy claims about, like, power being usurped and, like, basically having a coup internal of the tower, and then like the comparisons between Elida and Trump and the coup stuff, like there's just so many goddamn parallels between this particular political solution in the Wheel of Time and our current modern day politics that like isn't always the case, right? Like having a crazy power hungry dictator wannabe in the White House who won't admit that they've lost an election.
So just to really like trace out the parallels, we as a country elected Trump because the country wanted something different. They didn't want another run-of-the-mill status quo politician. And they wanted somebody who spoke to their fears and whatever else. And why did they get rid of Swan? And why did they put Elida in place? For those exact same reasons. They wanted somebody who fed off of their fears, or fed into their fears and validated those fears, and was different from the Blue Aja after Blue Aja after Blue Aja Aes Sedai who had been made Amyrlin. And
even blue and red. The colors are even blue and red. Like,
right.
Seriously.
And
like,
then
there's a caravan of male channelers coming over the border.
Right. No, the parallels are uncanny. And then you've got, Elida serves her term or whatever, and then her replacement is elected. And so now you have the White Tower and the Little Tower, and the leader of the White Tower is refusing to concede to the upcoming Amyrlin, and is potentially like going to completely unhinge the systemic government of the White Tower. And
in order to stay in power. And the backbiting and the undercutting and the power grabbing and the not trusting each other in the White Tower and the White House, White Tower, White House, like it's
and
just...
the staying in power by stoking fear and division.
Right, exactly.
And gaining more power by stoking fear and division.
So it's just, I mean, God, watching this right after the election while they are electing Egwene is, the timing is just, I mean...
uncanny.
You would think I planned it out when I started the podcast 3.5 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's wild. It's absolutely wild. Yeah. It's always been one of my favorite parts about the Wheel of Time is the politics. Like,
Right. And like, this is the thing is like, I don't want to get too much into modern day politics, but like, I do really love the politics in the Wheel of Time, and it's hard not to see how they are analogous to various modern day policies. And I'm not trying to offend anybody, but good God, like at this point, like Trump is so fucking crazy. Like I can't even. I
do like the comparison of Mitch McConnell to Alviarin the best out of these. I do think he's more Alviarin than Jeffrey Bornhold for sure.
Yep. No, that's a good one.
Like just constantly taking these bills and laws that are being passed and being like, nope, that's not going through. That's not going through. This one can go. Not that one though.
This one with these alterations.
Right.
No, that actually works really well.
Yeah. And like just refuses to die.
Oh, your politics are leaking.
Thanks. Sorry. I'll pick that up really quick. Let me wipe that up. Anyways. So yeah, she agrees Egwene agrees to obey the summons and is like, I'll get there as soon as I can.
And implies basically that she kind of has an idea of how to enter Teleron Riyadh in the flesh.
She doesn't imply that she has an idea. She straight up says that she has an idea. She's like, I think I know how to do it, but I wouldn't mind having a bit more information. And the wise ones are like, nope, you won't be getting it from us.
Yeah, and she's like, well, I think I can figure it out anyway. But basically, she says, I'll try. I'll do my best. I'm going to get there as fast as I possibly can.
And then...
And of course, I love it when she arrives and they're like, oh, that's faster than we expected. Good job. And it's like, no, she just teleported across half a continent overnight.
And you guys aren't trying to figure out how.
Yeah. You're just letting that go? Really?
Also, I think it's great that Egwene literally could have just teleported. She didn't have to do the whole, like, traveling on Bella's back. She literally could have just teleported from one spot to the other.
If she thought about it, yeah. Although I do think that the fact she got there in one night helped her a lot because it threw them so off. Metal Deterra made that point that, like, they expected it to take some time. They expected to make some preparation, and then all of a sudden she's there and she's Amyrlin's seat and she's waking them up at 2 a.m. the night you summoned her. Really? Like... They definitely didn't have as much time to prep and put things in motion to start puppeting her the way that they wanted to ahead of time. Exactly. Yeah.
She didn't know exactly where to go, but I think that what Swan does here is so cool. Every time that I see this, I totally flip to Star Wars and holo maps every single time I read this scene.
So basically she says, yeah, I can get there, but I don't know where. And Swan gives her that sort of 3-dimensional map that she brings up.
Mm-hmm.
I always go with you didn't play Myst, but you saw me playing it the other day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that, there's a holo projection of the island, and you have to put the right code into the holo projector to see the whole island. And that always reminds me of this map that she brings up. So if you played the original game of Myst, it had that sort of island projection.
The other scene that it reminds me of out of a movie is in the Hunger Games, when the game maker is, telling the people controlling the map to like throw in challenges and stuff, and they like circle a part of the map and that part of the map pops up, and they like use their hands to like change the terrain in the hologram and like add fires and add monsters and stuff onto the map. And like, it's this giant hologram, but everything that's happening on the hologram is happening in the arena that they've set up. It feels very much like
I'd only say you get that backwards. That feels like this because that happened much later.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this scene was written before that book or movie was created, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So anyways, she makes the map. It's super cool. This is when Shiriam says Swan's name and Egwene is like, Swan? It must be a woman of the same name. This younger Swan gave a self-satisfied sniff and a sharp nod, very reminiscent of Swan Sanche, but that was impossible.
And I like the fact that she's doing the best out of all of them with keeping her clothing steady, not only because she has more practice, but I always thought that Swan was one of the more self-controlled of the Aes Sedai. She was just more comfortable in herself. Which is something I also wanted to say with when Egwene was doing all that prep to go to bed. It's like, I think it's easier to maintain the image of yourself like dignified if you go to bed well prepped. Whereas if you go to bed all ruffled and stuff, then like that's kind of the image you're going to self-project.
Yeah, she was totally grounding herself. Because you can maintain your composure and your dignity better when you're grounded and comfortable and prepared.
It is. I meant to her. That's a good point. It's odd that Suan doesn't appear as her ageless self in Teleron Riyadh. I think she's had enough time. She spent many, many, many months on the road getting used to that. But that's actually an interesting point. Like the day after she was stilled, do you think if she popped into Teleron Riyadh, she would still picture herself and appear as ageless?
I think that when you entered Teleron Riyadh, you would probably show up at default what you actually look like, and then any modifications would come with your projection of those modifications.
Entirely. I think it's you show up by default how you think of yourself by thank you, residual self-image. Thank you, Jackson. But your self-perception has a large part to play in it, because often we see them pop in wearing they wear clothes that based on what they were thinking about when they went to bed.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of subconscious work going on to make certain things appear.
I don't know. I guess I'm totally fine with buying into that theory. I'm not super attached to mine. Maybe, Swan just has had enough time. I mean, she spent a long time after being stilled, locked in a cell with nothing but a bucket of water. So she probably got pretty used to her.
I didn't think it was that long. I thought that was like a week.
I mean, that's a long time to be tortured.
I don't know. I thought it was a pretty relaxing week the last time I was tortured. I mean, it was just hanging out with my parents. It wasn't that bad.
Woof. Sorry about it.
Oh, I love my parents.
I say that. I used to say that all the time about my old job. Like, if I tell myself this often enough, I might actually start to believe it.
Man, by the way, there's a party going on next door. So if you hear any banging on the recording, that's what it is.
She agrees to the summons. She agrees to come there through Teleron Riyadh in the flesh if she can figure it out. The Aes Sedai disappear without another word. The wise ones disappear without another word. And Egwene is just stuck there by herself, completely flabbergasted.
Basically, everyone's abandoned her.
Yep, feeling like a disappointment to everyone.
Everybody. Because she's, as far as she knows, she's being summoned to pay for a crime by the Aes Sedai and shunned by the Aiel for
choosing to enter Teleron Riyadh in the flesh.
Exactly, choosing Teleron. And like, she's just completely violated. For someone who throws her everything into what she does, she is essentially being told that the everything she's done for the last 2 years is just tossed in the trash. And the fact that she stands up and just deals with it is pretty impressive.
Yeah, like she immediately steps out of her body into wakefulness in the real world and just starts packing her shit to go.
And so then we just get a quick POV from Rand. I'm just going to read us out with that whole thing. It's like 2 paragraphs. As soon as Egwene disappeared, Rand stepped out from among the columns. He came here sometimes to look at Kalendor. That's the point I was making earlier. The first visit had been after Asmodean taught him to invert his weaves. Then he had changed the traps laid around the Sangreal so only he could see them. If the prophecies could be believed, whoever drew it out would, quote-unquote, follow after him. He was not sure how much he did believe any longer, but there was no sense taking chances. Lewis Theron rumbled somewhere in the back of his head. He always did when Rand came close to Kalendor, but tonight the gleaming crystal sword interested Rand not at all. He stared where the huge map had hung. Not really a map there at the end, but something more. What was this place? Was it simple chance that drew him here tonight instead of yesterday or tomorrow? One of his Taviran tugs on the pattern? No matter. Egwene had accepted that summons meekly, and that she would not do if it came from the tower in Elida. This Saladar was where her mysterious friends were hiding, where Elaine was. They had handed themselves to him. Laughing, he opened a gateway to the reflection of the palace in Camelin.
I picture that laugh as deranged.
Oh, absolutely insane.
The darkness of this scene and the darkness of his thoughts right now, with that, especially that last line, they had handed themselves to him, that laugh is maniacal.
Well, and honestly, he acts the exact same way when we see, like, Samael step out from behind the columns and spy and laugh and then open a gateway and walk away. He's acting like a Forsaken here.
Plotting and scheming and completely in it for his own power and gain.
Right. But I do love how, like, everything in Tel'aran'rhiod, nothing in Tel'aran'rhiod is safe. Like, all that information can be spied upon. Suan showed him, and I'm guessing a lot more people, like the Forsaken. You know, no wonder Arengar had no problem finding where Saladar was, where Halima was. Like, no one's hiding it. They're just terrible about sharing that information in Saladar.
Right, and anybody who's familiar with the world of dreams, if they take the time, can feel the presence of other people in Tel'aran'rhiod if they're conscious of being in Tel'aran'rhiod.
Yeah, although I wonder how many people actually have that skill. I mean, I know it's possible that everyone has it, but, you know, I think that Lanfear, maybe Moghedien, maybe Moradin. I don't think the rest of the Forsaken have that skill.
Yeah, I think Moradin, Lanfear, and Moghedien have it for sure. We see Grendel using the world of dreams, but I think that she's there in the flesh. I don't think that she's a dreamer or a dream walker, because those are 2 different talents.
Yeah, I mean, a dream walker and a dreamer. I thought it was a dreamer is the talent and a dream walker is.
No, so they're 2 completely separate talents. Dreaming, being a dreamer, is the ability to, or is having dreams that are prophetic and being able to maybe interpret them sometimes. Whereas being a dream walker is having the ability to enter Tel'aran'rhiod unaided.
But I thought if you were one, you were always the other.
No, there are dream walkers who are not dreamers. If you're a dreamer, you're probably a dream walker. I think those 2 go together, but not the other way around. So you can be a dreamer, or you can be a dream walker.
So you can be a square and not a rectangle, but you can't be a rectangle without also being a square.
Correct.
Other way around.
I don't think that Moghedien or Moradin or Lanfear have prophetic dreams, but they're all dream walkers.
Fair. Okay, that makes sense. That maybe dream walking is a skill that can be learned. Well, no, because you have to be born as a dream walker.
Right, yeah, it's a talent. You either have it or you don't. And you may have it to different degrees, just like healing is technically a talent that some people have more strongly than others. Or traveling. Yeah, dreaming and dream walking are not mutually exclusive. Yes, if you can dream walk. But if you can dream walk, you don't necessarily dream.
You don't necessarily have prophetic dreams.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I can accept that.
Anyone who can open a gateway can get into Tel'aran'rhiod if they are taught how, though. Yeah. If you're taught how to do that, if you're shown that weave, then yeah, I imagine you totally could. But right. That's not the same as being a dream walking,
because then you're there in the flesh.
Right.
When you're dream walking, your body's still laying in your bed somewhere, whereas when you enter in the flesh, your body is in the dream world.
Bambi, I think it might have just been a more common talent when there were a larger population in the world, and more channelers in the world. Not that dreaming and dreamwalking are tied to the one power inherently, because one of the wise ones that teaches dreamwalking is not a channeler.
Yeah, I'd actually really, I feel like we made a bunch of assertions in this episode about who's dreamwalking and who's entering in the flesh.
Mm-hmm.
I think we may be overestimating how many of the Forsaken are dreamwalking
Mm-hmm.
and underestimating how many are actually entering in the flesh.
Well, I think the only 3 that are actually dreamwalking are Moradin, Lanfear, and Moghedien. And I'm willing to cut Moradin out of there because he's bold enough to go in the flesh anywhere he wants to.
Yeah, I always thought Moradin, I always thought Moradin was captured in the boar. Or sorry, Ishamael was captured in the boar and was only dreamwalking. That's why we only ever really see him in the dream, is that that's sort of where he was partially captured, is his body was always captured, but he was able to access Teleron Riyadh.
Yeah.
And that's, in the first 3 books, we only ever see Ishamael in either a dream or a dream shard.
Right, which is why I totally think that he is actually a dreamwalker. Like, I'm willing to let that one go and say that, maybe he is just channeling his way in, but I do think that he is a dreamwalker because he puts himself into the 3 boys' dreams often. And
right. And he certainly feels strongly about them. You gotta wonder if maybe he got accidentally sucked into Rand's dreams once or twice.
That question is actually answered. So if you are not physically in the dream, but you are in the dream world and you weave a portal, you weave a gateway, nothing happens. Like, you step through the gateway and then you are no longer in the world of dreams, but you don't actually step out into the waking world. You just go back into your body. I don't remember what book that's in, but that is a thing that is talked about at some point, I believe. I know I'm not making this up.
Isn't that something that happens with Perrin and Lanfear?
Yes, that sounds familiar.
I feel like that's that era when Lanfear has compelled Perrin to be her ally, and they're kind of working together, but kind of not.
She's teaching him a couple of things, but doesn't want to give him everything. And she tells him that yeah, I could make a gateway, but since you're not here in the flesh, you would walk through the gateway and nothing would happen. Anyways, you wanted to say something about Narishma.
I was just curious, did you have anything to say about the prophecy of the one who will follow after? It's one of those things where I'm always looking for. It feels like one of the failed prophecies where it doesn't.
It does
really
feel like one of the failed prophecies to me. It seems like such a red herring prophecy because Narishma follows after and is super loyal to Rand for sure, but other than going back and retrieving Kalendor and not abusing that power that Kalendor would have offered him, and helping Rand defend himself while he cleansed the power, I don't necessarily think that we saw the manifestation of that prophecy. That's a good question, Jackson. Does Narishma survive survive the last battle? Maybe his follow after is something to do with something that happens in the Fourth Age.
So a theory I've seen, he does survive the last battle. He actually heals Lan a little bit. So this is the last time we see him, he's healing Lan. So that's definitely late in the battle. So it's presumed he survived. But possibly he could become the next head of the Black Tower.
After Logain?
After Logain. And that's something where he could be the next leader of the, and maybe he unites the Black Tower and the White Tower and becomes the next, Tamerlane. And that's where he follows after.
Especially because he's warder to Aes Sedai.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, technically, Logain is also bonded with Aes Sedai, but under much different circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it's a theory, but something about him could be the leader of the Aes Sedai who follows after Rand. So it could be definitely a Fourth Age thing where we don't actually get the outcome of that. But
I don't remember what happened to Kalendor after the last battle. Was it destroyed?
Did it? I don't think it got carried out with Rand in the body, so one would assume that it was left behind in the pit, and the pit collapsed. Remember, he got out just before the doors, the teeth snapped shut. So, assuming that it wasn't, because Rand was carrying Moradin,
and
I don't believe either of them had Kalendor at that point. And as far as we know, Moradin was the last person who had his hands on it.
Right.
So my presumption is that it got left in the cave.
Which means that it's pretty much irretrievable.
Yeah, right. That it's destroyed. Which makes sense. I mean, it's who it's a true power sangreal. Like, that's useless.
Yeah. Now that the Dark One is completely sealed away, that seal is back in place. That bore no longer exists. There is no more access to the true power.
Yeah, no, the Calendar is totally sealed in stone. So, it's basically a sword in the stone. Yeah.
Full circle. Check that out.
Full circle. Right back into the stone. Rand pulled it out, and he put it back in. And you've spent the last 2 weeks training on a new job.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was no secret that I hated my last job. And it isn't much of a secret that my last job wasn't particularly fond of me either.
I mean, what gave you the clue? The low pay, the bad treatment, or
I was going to say even more than the low pay, because I just expect that from American employers in general. But like the constant neglect, and if not neglect, then just like abuse from the managers was kind of a dead giveaway that they didn't actually like me or didn't actually care about me. So I put in my year there. I'd gotten the experience out of that company that I needed to do bigger and better things. And that's exactly what I did. I had a friend who left the company and found a job somewhere else that paid significantly better. And she advised me to apply because they were looking for people with our skill set. And I did. And I also got the job. And it was a massive pay raise for a company with vastly better resources and benefits and perks. And so far, it seems like a much cooler work environment as well. So I'm super thrilled about that. But, anytime you're starting a new job, there's all the training and stuff that you have to go through. And I'm not thrilled about that just because it's so much. Like I was telling you earlier, it's daunting. There's just like, here's all of this stuff that you're going to have to do every single day, and none of it makes any sense to you right now, but immerse yourself in it and get lost. And it's like, that's not how you deal with somebody who has an anxiety disorder.
Yeah, it seems like maybe a little more structured training would help. It seems like they've just sort of tossed you off in the deep end and said, go. It's
call center work for a health insurance program, and all of the plans that I will be doing customer service for they're like employer group insurances. So like when you work for a company and your insurance is through your company, I work with all of the companies that use Providence as their employee provided or employer provided healthcare. So I'm learning all of those plans and all of those networks and the ways to navigate through them and how to take the calls and how to navigate through the call system and what tools to use. And of course, none of it is streamlined and none of it's all in one location. I have to access every different thing through a million other different programs. Like, I've never understood why call centers don't just consolidate all of the work that they do into one software system, like so many other jobs do. Like, this isn't the first call center that I've worked in. It's just amazing to me that the system that you take your notes in and record your customer files in is different from the system that you take your calls in and record your calls in. And it's different from the system that you actually use to like quote your customers the terms of their plans and contracts. And it's like, why? Like if your customers need, replacement devices or replacement ID cards or whatever the case may be, that's ran out of a different program. And it's like, why can't all of that just be ran through one software system? Doesn't that just seem more ecological and streamlined?
Because they're kludging together a bunch of off-the-shelf parts and putting them together in a way that like works but isn't necessarily the way they were planned to be used.
they should be modules that the company can buy. I totally agree. They should be things that can be added into their base software system to streamline everything. And it bothers me that this is the largest employer and the largest healthcare provider in the Pacific Northwest, and that they're running their intranet system through Internet Explorer, and that all of their resources are scattered across like 50 different programs.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is also that software is a 30-year-old industry, and it doesn't have very many standards. It's still trying to figure out how to be an industry, and there's a lot of cruft out there, and a lot of really badly written software. And my issue with the software industry is the software industry needs regulated standards, and it needs, basically, if software is going to be put in production, it needs to be in the same way that like bridges are tested to failure. Like, you're not going to put a bridge out there that doesn't work. And I feel like software needs to pass a lot of the same tests, and that's not how software has been built. Software has been built by the seat of people's pants for a very long time.
As a complete patchwork. It amazes me how often a new software system is thrown out there, a new app or a new website or a new, even lately video games are thrown out, and they're not complete. And for the first year of this program or the software being available, you're getting all of these patches and updates that, stymie whatever you're doing or can even ruin whatever you're working on while the update is being patched in. And it's like, why didn't this just get tested, discovered, and fixed in beta? Why did you release a product that wasn't ready for release?
And that's one of the reasons I'm such a Mac fan, despite their many, 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 many flaws, don't rate me. They do generally write software that works together really well. Like what I'm able to do with this computer and how stable it is and how rarely I have crashes on here that aren't, something that I did. Don't delete your boot drive. That's a bad idea. That was my fault. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm always been amazed how stable and how integrated Mac software is. And that requires, or required anyway, a fanatical dictator who was kind of an asshole at the top to make sure that it was run that way.
Yeah, I switched over from Android to Apple probably 4 years ago for my phone, and maybe a little longer than that. And I always had top of the line Android phones. I didn't buy the cheap little $80 one that you can pull off the shelf at Walmart. I always had, a Samsung Galaxy, whatever the most recent Samsung Galaxy was or whatever. And when I switched over to iPhone, I was just like, this runs so much more smoothly and so much more cohesively with all of the things that I actually use my phone for, that all of this fluff about Android being more adaptable and more open and more customizable no longer means anything to me, because I never used any of that adaptability. I never used any of those customizations. I never rewrote my software on my Android phone to do anything special. I just used it default to do basic default social media things. So I completely agree that Apple has that right, where all of the software that you can use on Apple devices is just smooth.
I don't know how to describe it. Well, I can go off on how to describe it for a long time, but if you really, really like to get into the details of what I think about Apple software and hardware, go listen to Accidental Tech Podcast, because that's where I get most of my opinions. So, highly recommend those three guys. They've been doing that podcast for way too long, and it's where I learned most of what I know about how to podcast, and also where I know pretty much everything about. It's a great podcast, and they've been doing wonderful things. And you'll notice a certain structure to their podcast that I copied, which is business in the front, then music, then a little bit of bullshit after the music. Definitely where I got that from. So yeah, huge shout out to ATP.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Icons.
Also, thanks for ATP for powering the muscles. It's the powerhouse of the cell. That's another reference.
I thought the mitochondria was the powerhouse of the cell.
Yeah, but what do you think mitochondria makes?
I don't know. It's been a while.
ATP. It's if the mitochondria is the engine, ATP is the gasoline it produces or burns. I'm not sure. Does mitochondria create ATP or does it burn ATP? And by burn, I mean react. I got to go back and refresh my Krebs cycle. Right. But yeah, no, I was realizing now, like, I'm 38, so it's been literally 20 years since I graduated high school. So I've hit that, like, 22. People have finished high school who were born after I finished high school. Just a thought.
What year did you graduate?
Y2K.
Huh, the year that my sister was born.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a class of 13, baby.
Baby is the right term for that,
yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm totally bitching about my job, but I'm honestly much happier being away from the company that I was working for.
Oh, I can imagine.
And like some of the things that some of my friends that still work for that company have said that they have heard come out of the manager's mouth since I've left makes me even more happy that I left that company. Like,
about you?
About me, yeah.
Hmm.
Like, just kind of showing their colors and how fake they actually are. Kind of frustrating.
They were very mean to you when you let them know that you were leaving.
Yes, they were.
Which is not generally how a healthy company... Generally, a company that really cares about you sees you moving on to a better and better paying job that fits you better is going to be happy for you.
Right. And they had that smile on their face on the surface, but the way that they like stopped communicating anything with me and like ceased to notice that I existed for the last 2 weeks after I put in my notice. Like, yeah, you were telling me that you were happy that I found something better for myself and that I'm moving on to bigger and better things, but you're treating me like I cheated on you.
Yeah. It's like, okay, watch what they do, not what they say.
Yeah, no, it's a very toxic company, and it doesn't surprise me that they treated me that way when I left, because I had seen other people over the year that I was there put in their 2-week notices and get the same kind of cold shoulder treatment, where the bosses like accept their 2-week notice and then cut them out of the loop on everything and like ignore their existence and don't smile at them when they walk in the morning, and just all those little itty bitty clicky nasty toxic petty office bullshit things that people do in offices. And like I saw that happen to other people, so I expected it to happen with me, especially because I wasn't a favorite to begin with.
This is where I push back on the idea that we are supposed to give 2 weeks notice. I think we should do more I quit and walk out of jobs, and I don't, and I think that shouldn't affect how they review our performance. And especially just to be like, hey, listen, normally I would give 2 weeks, but based on what I've seen, you don't treat people who give 2 weeks well, so I'm leaving right now. Like, I feel like that's a totally legitimate thing to be able to say to a company is like, listen, I like to give 2 weeks, but the way I've seen you treat the people around me who have done the right thing makes me feel like that is not the right thing for me to do. So, bye.
The whole point of giving a 2-week notice, in theory, is so that your employer can use that 2 weeks to find, onboard, and either train or begin training your replacement. It gives them a grace period where they're not completely out an employee before they can find somebody to fill in your shoes when you're no longer in them. And like, I understand that, and that's, courteous or whatever, but like, that doesn't justify you treating the person who put in their notice like shit. It also would require that you be actively looking to employ and actively interviewing and actively hiring people when they put in their notice. And the fact that like, by the time that I had left, there were like 8 other people who had left the company that hadn't been replaced yet. We were overwhelmingly short-staffed already, which is one of the reasons I left, because I was sick of the expectation of doing the work of 3 people and getting paid less than 1 person. So yeah, the whole point of doing the 2-week notice, the only reason that I wrote out my 2-week notice was so that way if my new employer contacted my previous employer, I could actually get a good reference. Like, the only reason that I finished out my entire 2-week notice was purely selfish.
And it was kind of nice that you didn't have to have any break in income. That you basically, I mean, it would be nice to have a vacation, but you went from working Friday at one company to Monday at the next.
Yeah. There was no gap in pay. I mean, ultimately, I could have gone like a week because I had about 46 hours of PTO that I got cashed out on top of the final 2 weeks of pay. So I had like an extra week's worth of money. So I could have gone a week without, earning income and still been all right. But I had the same sort of thing. Like there was no actual gap in my earnings, and I do appreciate that.
Yeah. And it was probably nice to get that bonus of the payout for that week's worth of vacation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I need the deposit from you ASAP, and no,
I feel it. I finally feel like I'll be making enough money that like I can afford to do that without crippling everything else.
Basically going from living hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck, to living hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck, but being able to pay off your debt too. Yeah.
Like I'll finally be able to start making more than, $50 payments on my credit cards and actually pay you back for my half of the deposit of moving into this apartment.
And then maybe, buy something nice.
Yeah, something nice that costs more than like $40. Because spending $40 on myself in any given month is a splurge, and that's disgusting.
I'm excited to see how that works for you, and I'm hoping that, I know it's overwhelming right now, but I have faith that in 3 months you're going to be bored out of your mind because it's going to be repetitive and stupid. And yeah, it's just going to be, I have to just make sure to stop distracting you during the day, because that first week you were super distracted because it was like, this is how you open a window, this is how you click on things.
Right. And my first day, I couldn't even log into anything. I had no sign-on information. They did a terrible job. Like they did a bunch of work to onboard me, but no work to actually give me any access to anything or give me any like instructions or directions on how to sign into anything. Like I didn't know how to sign into the program that we use to clock in and out. I didn't know how to get into the training classroom. I didn't know what my usernames and passwords were. I didn't know anything. So I literally sat there my first day after doing the medical exam that I had to go do, and like sat at my desk on my phone scrolling through Facebook while I was emailing from my personal email the team to get the information that I needed to do anything else.
That's rough. Those first weeks when you at least in an office setting, you can like walk around and check out the, introduce yourself to people and like, peek your head into stuff and actually pester people in person. When you're at home doing nothing, just on your computer, it's like, yeah, I'm here waiting.
Yeah. So this is Thursday of the second week, and today was the first day that I was able to join the training using their equipment and not having to run their software on their equipment and then the training software on my own personal equipment. Yep. Like the fact that I'm almost at the end of my second week and it took that long to get me set up to log in drives me.
It's a worrying sign. Hopefully once they can get their shit together a little bit, and that's not a sign of, how the company's going to treat you in the future.
Sure. And I mean, they were on it. They were working on it. And it was a really weird, anomalous thing. That part of it was.
Gotcha.
And, the IT team was working. Well, Josh, I don't know about the rest of the team because Jennifer seems incompetent. But Josh was working on it really hard. And, he would hit me up every couple of days with like, okay, I finally heard back from the software developers and they want to try this and that and the other. And then finally something stuck. So... But also, I kind of don't blame them because they're still relatively new to, like, setting up new hires to work from home. Like, a lot of the people that went to work from home already were set up and just took the stuff right off of their desk home with them at the end of their last day in the office. It was already all downloaded and installed and put together. All they had to do was hardwire themselves into their internet at home, and they were good to go. So, there's the added hiccup of setting people up to work remotely and then adapting their training process to do remote training. It's all relatively new.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. For Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?